What would you do if the people you sacrificed for looked you in the eye and called you useless? It happened on a Thursday, the kind of dull, rainy afternoon that makes the walls of a house feel closer. Lean sat at the head of the dining table, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She had been waiting for her son to return from work to maybe share a cup of tea and a few words, but instead it was Mai, her daughter-in-law, who stormed into the room first, dripping with irritation more than rain. "You're just dead weight here," Mimai said, the words slicing through the still air like a blade. Her voice wasn't raised, but it had that sharp, calculated coldness people use when they want to bruise without shouting. Lean didn't answer right away. She studied Mai's face, wondering if she'd misheard. But no, Mai's jaw was tight, her lips curled with contempt. She wasn't speaking out of exhaustion. She meant it. And here's the thing, in moments like that, you can't argue. You can't fight for dignity with someone who's already decided you don't deserve it. You just feel the ground shift beneath you. And you realize you've been living on borrowed kindness, the kind that can be revoked without warning. You've felt that before, haven't you? That split second when someone you trusted strips you of value in their eyes, and you have to decide whether to plead or to vanish. Lean's mind flashed to all the evenings she had cooked for the family when Mai came home late. The mornings she had rocked her grandson so Mai could rest. The quiet hours she mended clothes no one thanked her for. In her heart, she thought she was part of the foundation. But to Mai, she was just extra weight. The front door opened. Her son, Dewey, stepped inside, shaking off the rain. He glanced between the two women. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone light, unaware he had walked into the middle of a wound. "Nothing," Mai said quickly, flashing a tight smile at him before retreating into the kitchen. Lean kept her eyes on the teacup in front of her. She wasn't going to repeat what had been said. Not to him. Not yet. That night she lay in bed listening to the soft hum of rain on the roof. The words wouldn't leave her. Dead weight. The phrase turned over in her mind, heavy and ugly, sticking to her ribs. She realized that over the years she had traded her independence for proximity to family, thinking love would fill the gap. But love, when conditional, is a dangerous thing to depend on. You ever notice how people can use comfort as a leash? They wrap it around your throat with gifts and smiles until the day they yank it and remind you who's in control. By morning, Lean's resolve had shifted. She moved through the house in silence, folding laundry, watering the plants, making breakfast. She was the ghost of her usual self, deliberate and watchful. Mai barely looked at her, busy on her phone between bites of toast. Dewey kissed his mother on the cheek before heading to work, none the wiser. It was 3 days later on Sunday morning when Leanne quietly started packing. Not everything just what was hers. A suitcase for clothes, a small box for keepsakes, an envelope of documents she'd kept hidden in the back of a drawer. Her movements were steady, almost ceremonial. She wasn't running away. She was removing herself piece by piece, like a shadow peeling off a wall. And here's where most people get it wrong. Leaving isn't always an act of defeat. Sometimes it's the most silent form of power. Sometimes you don't slam the door, you just disappear and leave them to face what they've built without you. She had one last thing to do before she left the finances. Over the years, she had been quietly paying off certain family expenses, a lingering debt from a failed business venture Dewey had started before he met Mai. No one ever asked her how she managed it. They just let her handle it, assuming she'd always be there. That morning, she called the bank, adjusted the automatic transfers, closed a small investment account she had never mentioned. The numbers shifted in her mind like chess pieces, and she realized for the first time in years, she held the checkmate. When she zipped her suitcase shut, the house was silent. She left the key on the kitchen counter beside an envelope. Inside was a single note, her handwriting steady and small. "You called me dead weight. Let's see how light you feel without me." She didn't wait for them to come home. She stepped into the rain with her suitcase, her head high, her heart strangely calm. The envelope sat untouched on the counter for hours before Mai noticed it. It was late afternoon when she walked into the kitchen, still in her silk robe, scrolling through her phone. She almost didn't see it. She might have left it there unopened had she not noticed the absence, first the empty space on the coat rack where Leanne's worn cardigan used to hang. The corner of the living room where her sewing basket sat was bare. The faint scent of her herbal balm, usually lingering in the hallway, was gone. Mai picked up the envelope with a frown. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Inside the note was short, too short to soften the sting. "You called me dead weight. Let's see how light you feel without me." For a moment, Mai just stood there, the paper trembling in her hand. You know that feeling when you realize the person you underestimated was watching you the entire time, that creeping unwanted heat in your chest. Not guilt exactly, but the discomfort of being outplayed. She had dismissed Lian like a worn-out chair, and now the chair was gone, along with the quiet, invisible support it had been providing all along. When Dewey came home that evening, Mai didn't mention the note right away. She was in the kitchen, banging pans louder than necessary, a storm brewing behind her eyes. "Where's me?" Dewey asked, looking around. "She left," Mai said flatly. "Didn't say where." His brow furrowed. "Left? Why?" "How should I know?" she snapped, but her tone was too defensive, too quick. And here's the thing, people rarely confess the cruelty that drives someone away. They'll rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. They'll say, she was sensitive, she overreacted, but they'll never admit that their words were a hammer and the other person just refused to be the nail anymore. It didn't take long for reality to seep in. The first bill came a week later, higher than usual. Then a late notice for a payment Dewey thought was on autopay. Mai ignored the signs at first, thinking it was just a glitch. But soon the cracks widened. Groceries were suddenly their responsibility in full. The quiet disappearance of Lien's contributions was like pulling bricks from a wall. At first, nothing happens. Then the whole structure trembles. Lien, meanwhile, had checked into a modest guest house in a small coastal town 2 hours away. The sea was gray and moody that time of year, the wind carrying a salty chill. She liked it. It suited her mood. In the mornings, she'd sit by the window with her tea, watching fishing boats drift toward the horizon. There was a calmness in the air she hadn't felt in years, the kind that comes when no one is watching you, expecting you to serve. Do you know what it's like to rediscover silence after living in a house full of noise? At first, it feels lonely, almost unbearable, but then you start to hear yourself again. She began visiting the small market, chatting with the vendors, learning the names of the people who sold her fresh vegetables and fish. She didn't tell them much about herself, but they noticed her polite smile, her careful way of choosing fruit. She was becoming a part of a new place, and with each passing day, the word dead weight faded into the background like an old bruise. Back in the city, Mai's resentment grew. She started telling friends that Lien had run off, shaking her head as if she were baffled by the betrayal. Dewey, though, stayed quiet. Something in his gut told him there was more to it. He started remembering little moments, how his mother had been quieter lately, how Mai's tone with her had sometimes been sharp. He didn't ask Mai directly. Maybe he didn't want the answer. But the question sat between them like an unwelcome guest at the dinner table. 2 weeks after Lien's departure, Dewey got a call from the bank. A joint account he hadn't even known existed was now closed, and the payments for his old business loan were no longer being made. It hit him like a splash of cold water. All those years, he thought the debt was slowly disappearing on its own. It had been his mother quietly taking the burden. Imagine finding out the person you allowed to be belittled had been carrying your weight all along. Would you feel shame or anger at yourself? That night, Dewey asked Mai directly, "What happened between you and me?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. "She was just too much sometimes." "Too much," he repeated, his voice low. "Or too much for you?" She turned away, her jaw tight. In that moment, Dewey saw her differently, not as the golden, tireless wife he had defended, but as someone who could wound with a smile and sleep soundly after. And far away in that little coastal town, Lien slept peacefully for the first time in months. She didn't know yet that the absence of her hands in their lives was becoming heavier than her presence had ever been. The cracks didn't just widen, they began to sing a low metallic humming in the bones of the house that Mai could not silence. It started small, a declined card at the supermarket, a notice about the electricity that had accidentally missed its draft. Then came the real humiliation, at a dinner with friends, the card machine blinking red, while the waiter waited expressionlessly polite as Mai fumbled with her phone. Dewey covered it with his personal card, jaw clenched, and they drove home in a silence so loud it made the steering wheel feel hot. You know that heat, don't you? The kind that isn't anger yet, but shame, dressed in expensive clothes. It climbs your neck, grips your scalp. You tell yourself it's a glitch, a blip, a one-off. But deep down, your body knows when you're standing at the edge of a cliff you built yourself. 3 days later, a letter came from the Homeowners Association. Fees overdue. Another notice from the bank regarding the business loan. It read like a summons. Dewey sat at the dining table with the envelope open while Mai hovered arms crossed a porcelain statue with a pulse. So he said finally she was paying this. All of it. That's manipulative, Mai snapped. Who does that without telling us? Dewey set the letter down. Maybe someone who knew if she told you you'd call it charity. You're defending her. I'm remembering her. There it was, the first fracture that ran down the middle of their marriage and kept going. You could feel it, right? The way partners stop sharing a language without anyone moving their lips. That evening, the doorbell rang. A polite man in a navy suit and tired eyes introduced himself as representing the bank's recovery department. He was soft-spoken, almost apologetic. He had seen this scene too many times to take pleasure in it. He explained the arrears. He explained the options. He asked if they had family support. Mai's mouth hardened. Dewey stared at the floor. You might think she'd pick up the phone then. You might think the pride would crack just enough to let a little humility through. But pride is a stubborn god. It devours offerings and demands more. Mai waited until midnight to call Lien, as if the darkness would make it a smaller admission. Lien answered on the third ring. Yes. For a moment, Mai heard the sea through the line, a hush, a breath, the kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full. You left, Mai said the words, flat, almost childish. I did. You closed accounts. I did. Why? Lien's voice didn't raise. Because you told me I was dead weight. And I believed you. You're being dramatic. Mai scoffed, but her voice trembled. We're in trouble now. Dewey's business loan is... That was never your trouble, Lien said. I made it mine. I won't anymore. You can't just walk away. I already have. You felt the shift too, didn't you? The moment a quiet woman stops explaining herself, a palace of excuses collapses. The shadow in the hallway grows a spine. The familiar becomes unknowable. When the call ended, Mai stood very still, phone still warm in her hand. She remembered every small kindness she'd dismissed as routine, the extra set of keys magically returned to the dish when she lost them, the way chocolates appeared in the pantry before guests arrived, the shirts ironed without creases, the loans paid down without loud announcements. It made her furious. How dare generosity make her feel indebted? How dare the absence of a woman reveal the scaffolding of her life? In the coastal town, Lien folded her phone shut and looked at the sea. She had visited a local notary that afternoon, not for drama, not for vengeance, for clarity. She revoked a dormant power of attorney Dewey had once asked for when he was drowning in paperwork. She updated beneficiaries on her small accounts, the ones she had carefully grown from years of quiet work. She wrote a neat list of what was hers and what wasn't, and lit a stick of sandalwood in thanks to no one in particular. Have you ever watched yourself return? It's not loud. It's a slow tightening of threads, a restitching of your own name onto your skin. Dewey came to see her 2 days later. He texted first. Consid me, just to talk. She met him at a cafe with fogged windows and strong coffee. He looked older, like he'd run without stopping. He didn't hug her. She didn't make him. They sat. I didn't know, he said softly. About the loans. About everything. I didn't want you to, she replied. I wanted you to live. He swallowed. She can be your wife. Lien finished gently. Her nature is for you to understand, not for me to fight. He stared at his hands. She said something to you, didn't she? Lien took a breath. She named me. I decided she was right. You might want her to pour everything out then, to confess the hurt, to beg him to choose. But the quiet mother knows that forced loyalty is a cage. She will not build another. She sipped her coffee instead. Will you come back? He asked finally. No, she said. Not now. Maybe not ever. He nodded, eyes shining. What should I do? Stand up, she said. For yourself, for the boy you were before you needed everyone to like you. And pay what you owe. He laughed a small broken sound. We might lose the house. Then let it be the house, Lien said. Better a house than your soul. When he left, Lien watched him go without following. She felt the ache, yes, but it was clean like a wound washed with salt. In the space he left behind, a different warmth arrived, not happiness yet, but freedom stretching its limbs. Back in the city, Mai opened the closet and stared at the dresses she'd collected like trophies. She chose the sharpest one and put on lipstick like war paint. She would host a small gathering that weekend, she decided. She would prove nothing had changed. She would prove she could float without the stone she had called dead weight. But you know what happens when a person throws a party over a sinkhole? The floor waits, the floor listens, and then the floor makes a decision. The night of the gathering, the house looked polished, almost defiant. Candles glowed along the hallway, trays of hors d'oeuvres sat neatly on the table, and the living room hummed with polite chatter. Mai floated from guest to guest, her laughter a little too high, her hand lingering on wine glasses a little too long. But there was a hollowness in the air that no candlelight could disguise. You've been in a room like that, haven't you? Everything looks perfect, but something in the temperature feels off. People can't name it, but they sense it. The absence of the person who used to make the place feel like home. Dewey was there, of course, but he moved differently now. He didn't hover near Mai, didn't rush to refill drinks. Instead, he stayed near the wall, speaking in low tones to an older couple. Every so often, his eyes would drift toward the empty corner where his mother's small bamboo plant used to sit. Halfway through the night, a neighbor who didn't know better asked, "Where's your me? I miss seeing her in the garden." Mai's smile froze for half a beat before she replied, "She's taking some time away." Her tone was light, but her knuckles were white around her wine glass. She moved on quickly, steering the conversation toward someone else's scandal. Yet whispers travel differently when the foundation of a story is shaky. People began to notice the small things, the slightly mismatched linens, the wine glasses with faint spots, the absence of that warm, almost invisible hospitality that made visits linger. It's strange how you don't realize who's holding the net until you feel the drop. Across town, Leanne sat in a small seafood restaurant, a bowl of steaming clam soup in front of her. She had been invited by the market vendor's wife, a cheerful woman, who insisted she try the local specialty. The chatter around her was low and warm, the kind of sound that invites you to exhale. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, as though teaching her body it no longer had to rush. Do you know what happens when someone who has been invisible begins to take up space? At first it feels like an accident. The extra chair pulled out the waiter asking, "And for you, madam." But then slowly it becomes a choice. Meanwhile, the walls of the city house began closing in. 2 days after the party, the electricity bill arrived, double the usual amount. A follow-up letter from the bank mentioned possible repossession if payments weren't made within the month. Dewey read it at the kitchen table while Mai scrolled on her phone, pretending the world outside the screen didn't exist. "You can sell the car," she said without looking up. "That won't cover half of it," he replied. "Then maybe we talk to your mother." Dewey set the letter down, his gaze steady. "You talk to her." Pride is a strange animal. It starves in silence before it eats from the hand it slapped. But desperation loosens the jaw. That evening, Mai called again. This time, Leanne let it ring twice before answering. "We're in trouble," Mai said, skipping the preamble. "I heard. We could lose the house. I told Dewey better a house than a soul." "Don't play with me." Mai's voice sharpened. "I'm not playing," Leanne said. "I simply stopped paying for the privilege of being insulted in my own home. You hear the steel there, don't you? It's not loud, but it's final. A woman doesn't have to raise her voice when her absence is already screaming." "Do you want me to beg?" Mai asked, the words tasting foreign in her mouth. "No," Leanne replied. "I want you to understand that every kindness has a cost, and you already spent mine." When the call ended, Mai sat in the dim kitchen phone, still in her hand, staring at the unpaid bills. For the first time, she realized this wasn't about winning her back or proving her wrong. This was about survival, and she had cut the rope that kept her steady. In the coastal town, Leanne went for a walk by the shore. The tide was low, revealing long stretches of wet sand scattered with shells. She bent to pick one up, a smooth, pale spiral, and slipped it into her pocket. She thought about her old life not with longing, but with the kind of detached curiosity you feel when you revisit an old diary. Sometimes survival isn't staying afloat in the same sinking boat. Sometimes it's swimming to another shore and letting the water take the rest. Back in the city, Dewey began making calls selling furniture, finding extra work, negotiating with the bank. He didn't ask his mother for help again. He had heard something in her voice that told him this was no longer his choice to make. Mai, however, still believed she could turn the tide. She planned another visit to the coastal town, not to apologize but to negotiate, because some people only understand peace when they can own it. She didn't yet know that the door she was heading toward had already closed, and that sometimes, when you knock too late, the lock changes. It was a gray, wind-cut morning when Mai arrived in the coastal town. The taxi dropped her at the narrow street where fishing nets hung from balconies and the air smelled of brine. She stepped out in a tailored coat, heels clicking against the uneven stones, a deliberate picture of control. But if you looked closely, you could see the tension in her shoulders, the kind that comes from walking into a battle without knowing the terrain. She found the guest house easily. It was the only one with blue shutters and pots of bougainvillea spilling over the balcony. She knocked once, twice. No answer. A curtain shifted upstairs, and moments later Lean appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Mai," she said evenly. Mai replied, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" Lean stepped aside just enough to let her in. The space smelled faintly of tea and sandalwood. Sunlight spilled across a small wooden table where a half-finished crossword lay beside a mug. "You can feel it, can't you? That moment when the power dynamic tilts, when the person who used to stand small in the corner is now standing in their own light." Mai didn't sit right away. "We're in trouble," she began, her voice steady but urgent. "The bank is threatening repossession. Dewey's doing what he can, but we can't cover it." Lean listened without interrupting, her face calm. "And you've come to ask me to fix it. I've come to ask you to reconsider," Mai corrected, lifting her chin. Lion's eyes softened, but not in pity. "Do you remember the day you called me dead weight? That was no." "Listen." Leon's voice was quiet, but it cut clean. "I carried more than you ever knew. I did it without asking for thanks. But the day you named me useless, you made it clear my presence wasn't wanted. And when someone shows me my place, I stay out of it." Mai shifted the silence, pressing against her. "I was frustrated," she said finally. "I said things I didn't mean." "Frustration doesn't invent cruelty," Leon replied. "You've heard that truth before, haven't you? It lands like a stone in the gut because it leaves no door for excuses." "Look," Mai tried again, her voice softening. "Maybe we both said things I didn't say anything to you." Leon cut in. "I acted. And now I am continuing to act. My decision isn't revenge, Mai, it's protection of myself." There it was, the quiet mother's boundary. No drama, no shouting, just an unmovable line drawn in the sand. Mai's eyes narrowed. "So you'll just watch your son lose everything?" "He won't lose everything," Leanne said. "He'll lose what can be replaced. And he'll gain what can't, the knowledge of what it costs, when you let someone you love be diminished in your home." Mai stood, then her coat swaying. "You're colder than I thought." "I'm warmer than you ever noticed," Leanne said. When Mai left, the wind had picked up, carrying the sharp scent of the sea. She walked fast, as if distance could erase the conversation. But you know how certain words cling. They don't just sit in your ears. They lodge themselves in your bones. Back in the guest house, Leanne returned to her crossword, the faint hum of a kettle on the stove. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt whole. Sometimes victory doesn't taste like sweetness. Sometimes it's just the absence of bitterness. Days passed. The city house was listed for sale. Dewey handled the agents, the papers, the quiet packing of boxes. Mai stopped hosting gatherings. She didn't have the energy to perform warmth. One evening, Dewey came to the coastal town alone. He brought no documents, no requests, only a paper bag with 2 mangoes perfectly ripe. "They're from the old market," he said, placing them on the table. "The vendor said you used to buy from him." Lean smiled faintly. "I remember." They ate together in near silence, the way people do when the air is still tender, but safe. Before leaving, Dewey said, "I know why you left, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Lean touched his hand. "Seeing it now is enough." As he walked away, she watched from the doorway. He didn't look back, but his shoulders seemed lighter, as though he had put something down or perhaps picked something up. You see, this is the thing about leaving. It's not always the end. Sometimes it's the only way to make space for someone to return differently. Far behind him in the house, they would soon leave. Mai stood at the window, staring at the streetlight's glow on the pavement. She had thought she could outlast absence with stubbornness, but absence, when it's earned, becomes a mirror. And mirrors have no mercy. The tide in Lien's town rose high that night, waves slapping against the pier with a steady rhythm. She listened from her room, a quiet smile touching her lips. She wasn't thinking about the house, the debt, or the woman who had called her dead weight. She was thinking about the next day's market, the smell of fresh mangoes, and the peace of choosing where she belonged. The woman who knows her worth doesn't beg, she watches. Then she rises.